All show here on New Zealand Sports Radio. I'm Paul, and I'll be your host this evening. And obviously, we are going to be talking about the North-South game because that's the big rugby that's coming up. We also have the Mitre 10 Cup in near view now, so we'll have a quick chat about that. And also, we're going to be talking about rugby rules, which is a new innovation to try and fix some of the issues that have creeped into rugby over the last few years as people just tinker with the laws. How about let's start all over again from fresh and get it sorted? That's the plan. And joining me this evening, as always, we have Stephen Harris, my co-host. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very good, thank you, Paul. I hope you've had a good day. Always a privilege and a pleasure to be on the DrivingMaul.
No, I had a good day, and obviously with just the two games of Super Rugby AU at the weekend, we've had it's been a bit of a sort of calming down after the Feast of Rugby before the storm that's going to hit us with Mitre 10 Cup as well. So hopefully you had a nice relaxing weekend. Also regular guest Boa, how are you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you. My most look forward to event of the week being here on this show right here. So always a pleasure. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone is safe wherever you are in the country, right around the globe. Great to be here, guys.
Thank you very much. And our special guest this week is David Moffett. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Paul. And it's also a privilege for me to be here on your show. It came about pretty quickly this afternoon, but yeah, we'll try and make it as interesting and informative as we can.
Yeah, well, that's what you see. If you are the founder, the kind of the editor, the producer, the cameraman, the lighting man, the technician, and all of that all in one person, you can be nimble and change quickly. We don't have to go get sign off from any CEOs here.
No.
Just a quick, some background about David. You've been the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, of Welsh Rugby, and NRL. So you're a man who knows the world of rugby well and have been involved at all levels, but from playing all the way up to running things from the top. A man who's obviously seen the introduction of or the move, particularly from us from amateur to professionalism, and sort of helped bring that through in various different countries, in Wales and New Zealand. Do you feel that we're perhaps that the game has matured as a professional thing? We're about ready for the next big change in rugby with the whole global calendar and that kind of piece, or do you think that we've just got ourselves bogged down and got too many competing forces in rugby? Do you think?
I was also a referee as well, which I think is important in what I'm doing at the moment. But you've asked a question which would most likely keep us occupied for the next 2 to 3 hours, really, about professional rugby. For some time now, I've been arguing that professional rugby has sucked the lifeblood out of the sport to a large extent. I mean, we now have World Rugby that is only interested in the very top 0.1% of people that play the game. They pay lip service to the development of the game, but we got a couple of guys here from Sri Lanka, and they could do an awful lot more in those countries which are passionate about rugby for a start. And I say they've sucked the lifeblood out of it because no matter where you go around the world, grassroots is struggling big time in places like Wales and to a certain extent in Australia. The clubs here, my local clubs, they really struggle from year to year, and I think that's going to have to be addressed. And a few professional players have sucked all the money out of the game, and to be quite honest with you, 50% of them are most likely not even worthy of being called professional rugby players. They're not good enough to pay the sort of money they're on, but that happens because there aren't enough of us, or not me, enough players of that quality. And so that people might say, "Oh, geez, that sounds a bit hard." Well, it is, but it's the truth.
So it's and with more professional leagues kicking off, so with Major League Rugby kicking off in the States, the growth of the top league in Japan, there's just becoming more and more demand for those players. I guess a slight rabbit hole. I wasn't thinking of going about there. I've led myself down here. Boa, obviously, as someone who's active with club rugby in Auckland, you can also see that what Dave was talking there about struggling from year to year about trying to maintain numbers and put sides out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with the changing face of rugby, and as David rightly mentioned, professionalism, what it's starting to do is put this big gulf between the haves and the have-nots. Now, for example, the club where I'm involved with, Manuka Rowers. I mean, we are a club based in South Auckland. Lots of talent pouring through the age grades. We struggle to retain the guys at senior or premier and premier development level because they get filtered out to the clubs who go down this path of professionalism and where the money is paid to some of these players. And I agree wholeheartedly with David, because most of these guys who are actually getting paid don't deserve a penny of it, because to me, that diminishes the value of what you call a professional player. Now, this is happening pretty much right around the globe. I was watching some of the Guinness Pro 14 as well as some of the Premiership games, and I was going through some of the team sheets. Now, all these players who play these games, they're fully paid professionals. But the reality is there's less than maybe 4 or 5% of players where fans who pay a gate, or in this instance, pay-per-view television, should be actually watching, because most of these other guys just hangers on, and they're not quite up to that level of what you call a professional or a professionally paid player's skill base. But because pretty much all the clubs right around the globe, they want to have success, and they perceive that getting players who are on the payroll is the easiest way to get that success. This system has evolved where you have a lot of players and a lot of people jumping on this gravy train. So what this is systematically doing is taking lots of players out of the grassroots, siphoning them into these professional leagues right around the world, and mediocre competitions are actually now being called professional leagues, and it's mushrooming right around the world. I agree fully with what David is saying.
And on the flip side of that, a rugby player's career is short and can be cut short very quickly by injuries. So they do need to earn what money they can in the short period of time that they do have a career in that one. And obviously they'll have to move on and have a secondary career of something else, but they'll need enough to set themselves up in that way. But before we go down the sort of pro versus amateur for too long, the other thing that David, that you mentioned before we got into this, this afternoon before you came on the show, was how important you think Mitre 10 Cup rugby is, and that's a sport, that's a tournament that myself and Stephen love and get around to quite a lot. So can you just give us your view as to how important you think this Mitre 10 Cup is to New Zealand rugby and why it's so important?
Well, simple question to answer. It's the most important rugby competition in New Zealand. Without it, we wouldn't find and be able to bring through players that can make it at the Super Rugby level and then go on to become All Blacks. I mean, one of the great things about New Zealand is that All Blacks can come from anywhere. And back in my day, well, even now, they come from the smallest rugby clubs and perhaps not so much these days, but certainly they're still able to do that. And they wouldn't ever be discovered if there wasn't the Mitre 10 Cup. I mean, it's phenomenally important. And it's one of the things that actually Australia lacks. It doesn't have the similar sort of competition that can bring their players through to the next level. And as a consequence of that, they suffer. Um, Obviously, then before you even get to Mitre 10, you've got a situation where the clubs play such an important role. And that's what I'm saying about this whole, professional amateur dichotomy. The fact of the matter is that players don't just knock on the door of New Zealand rugby and say, I'm here and I want to be a professional rugby player. No, they've started from when they're 6 years old, all the way through the clubs, being looked after by all those volunteers that give of their time, and then they eventually come through, because that's what happens. The cream will rise to the top, and they'll become All Blacks. And I just can't speak highly enough of the need to maintain a vibrant Mitre 10.
I totally agree with you about the vibrant Mitre 10, but I think your players now are having to migrate away to at least the Mitre 10 Cup province. So you can no longer get called up out of King's Country, for example, such as Meads was back in the day. So I think that there is definitely some areas that you have to migrate to. But Stephen, being a fan of Northland, you're a big. You agree with how important Mitre 10 Cup is, and how important it is that it's not just in the big cities.
Yeah, very much so. I always get asked a very similar question. What's important to you? What's really important is that chain between club rugby and Mitre 10 Cup rugby, because David's spot on. Those are the guys that go on to play professional rugby, but you want to also keep those guys as part of your community. And over the years, New Zealand rugby has saw it fit to basically pull a lot of these guys out of Mitre 10 Cup, and those are the guys you go and watch, even with your All Blacks. I think there's almost, David, I don't know who basically was it, the tail wagging the dog with the head wagging the tail, but you almost got the impression, even during Steve Hansen's era, and no disrespect to him, he's a great coach, but I almost got the impression he was running the show at times, and he could pull players out of various competitions. And you take, for example, a small union like Manawatu, who may have had a couple of All Blacks running around, but they'd be pulled out of their Mitre 10 Cup squads and practically put on standby for the All Blacks, and they'd never get to play. And of course, Manawatu not only missed out on the services of these players, but you also look at somebody who's the Manawatu coach. You need those players there. The community needs those players running out on the field, and that's something that really got up my nose a wee bit. And of course, when the McKinsey report came out earlier in the year, I thought to myself, seriously, New Zealand rugby? That was nothing that we didn't already know. We knew the problems, and I certainly don't think you needed a consultancy firm to head out and pay a lot of money to get that put on a piece of paper. It was something we always knew. Do you look after the grassroots? Yeah.
Sorry, Steve, I'd just like to make another point. You go and talk to the All Blacks and find out if they want to go back and play for their province. And I will bet you'd get 100% of them saying, we want to go back and we want to play for Manawatu, or if it was, some of the players from the past, Horowhenua or somewhere like that. Because that's where they came from, and they can then reconnect. So I think that if this, Tri Nations or Four Nations, whatever, the championship doesn't take place this year, I'm hoping that the All Blacks will go and play for their provinces. And, as soon as they go there, could you imagine how they will help lift the standard of those players around them? I mean, it would just be phenomenal. They don't do it these days because there's just not enough time. There's not enough weeks in the year. But when you have an opportunity like this, I'm a firm believer that you should never waste a good crisis. And perhaps they can do something good here.
You look at some of these squads that have been announced with all their All Blacks, and it's just mouthwatering to maybe see a side like Wellington run out against Canterbury with all their All Blacks on board. It's like Super Rugby Aotearoa all over again. You know, you've got these two very, very powerful sides running out. You know, one thing I admire about the NRL, rugby will always be my game, but what I like about the NRL, you get their top players will run out and play State of Origin on the Wednesday night, and they will do anything to turn out for their clubs on the weekend as well. Listen, it is what it is. These guys get paid to do a job. I know it's a physical game, and there'll be people saying, "Gee, Steve, pull your head in. You haven't played at this level." But you know what? You're living the dream, right? You know, if I had it my way back in the day, I would have played rugby every day of the week. That's how much I love the game. And I had mates like that. I even had some mates who would play club rugby on a Saturday and go play social rugby league on the Sunday just because they just loved running around.
Stephen, you really don't want to play down your rugby achievements. Remember, you have packed down in the same pack as Michael Jones. You have played against Ironi Clark, I think it was, or in St. James, Ironi Clark. Go on, you've played with some good players, even if it was only at club level.
Oh no, you're embarrassing me now. Now, Paul, we'll go back to the subject.
Gentlemen, one thing I just want to add to what David was saying about, you know, All Blacks and rep players coming and playing for their provinces. What I would love to see is, purely from a club rugby perspective, aligning club seasons with the NPC or the Mighty 10. Because what that will do is allow a wider squad of players. If they need some form, they can go back to their clubs and play club rugby. And those who will progress will play a provincial game. And this is going to create a lot of competition, especially at the grassroots level. And it'll open more pathways for players to be selected at the Mighty 10 level. Now, for example, most of the clubs in South Auckland, you know, we have a number of players. And as David rightly stated, I mean, never waste a good crisis. Because of COVID, we had a number of players who were playing in Europe and especially Japan coming down to New Zealand and wanting to play club rugby. Some got clearance from their respective unions, some nothing doing. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And, you know, if you go and ask these players, guys, what is it that you want to do? All they want to do is just get on the field, feel some grass under their feet and play some rugby. And by getting these players on the field, it's going to bring more crowds to the grassroots, and also having players of this quality around grassroots players, amateurs, the training standards, the intensity just lifts straight through the roof. And this is something I have seen firsthand, where we had a couple of boys who are applying their trade in Japan coming over and training with us. And, you know, it had such a profound positive influence on the wider training squad. You know, it was fantastic. I just wish that we can do more of it on a more consistent manner.
Interesting question there by Jordan Clark. Is the media's greed for money that's slowly destroying grassroots rugby globally? No, I don't think it is the media's greed for money. I think they're really short of money, but it's about the audience that there is for that. I mean, look, we've myself, Stephen, and Bo have all enjoyed the Auckland club competition this year to a great. We have to stop here and say hello, Kristen. Yes, your dad is on the show. Thank you for
Kristen. That's my daughter. She's in Australia. She's in Australia, by the way. It's not so much the media do basically a short of cash, and we've seen that already. The fact that Radio Sport shut down, that both Stuff and the New Zealand Herald probably laid off about half of their sporting journalists. And look, those things were sped up by COVID, but were not things that were, but they weren't caused by COVID. They were already happening anyway. So yeah. Just on, if I could just on that point, I was talking to a guy on Twitter earlier on who was raising the issue of whether I've been recommending that perhaps up in the UK they should have a British and Irish league, and what's stopping that is England. And this guy just sort of said he didn't know whether that was ever going to work, and because the television companies wouldn't want to buy into it. And I pointed out to him, look, TV's still got a role to play, but in the future, sports may just develop their own streaming options, like you guys are doing here. I mean, you know, you're actually filling a void that's been left by what's happened with sports radio vacating this area in New Zealand, and the fact that, let's say, New Zealand rugby could have its own streaming service very simply, very easily these days, and get paid by a whole lot of people directly. So, you know, I'm not so sure that television are actually fully understanding the sort of pressures that they're also going to come under. They most likely do, because they're right in the middle of it. But I definitely think that there are some opportunities that are going to present themselves for sports of all sorts, particularly in rugby, and especially those countries where, like, for example, New Zealand and England and even Wales and those countries, who can actually stream their own product. And then you've also got the big players, big streamers, like Netflix and perhaps Google, who've got a lot of money and who are looking at these opportunities. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think television can be blamed for anything other than bringing us the best available sport. But things, I think the whole, you know, the fact that you can just set this up in about 24 hours, I think you guys did it when you first started. I mean, it's phenomenal, and it's going to happen more and more.
It is. There was 6 years of learning before we could do that in 24 hours. But there's, but you're right. Yes, it can be done in a short amount of time if you know what you need to do. And I think British and Irish League would absolutely have an audience. Look, there was let's be honest, in the old days, the games between the English clubs and the Welsh clubs drew massive crowds, and the European Champions Cup draws lots of interest as well. So clearly there is an interest for it if they decide to go down that route. But you're right that Stephen, for example, was commentator of the Northland club Premiership final this year, and that got streamed. Unfortunately, I couldn't travel across Auckland at the time because of the COVID to get up there and do some and help with the camera work and and overlays and things. But yeah, you can. Those sort of things can definitely be done, and we're definitely getting there. Now, you came on for a different reason than what we've been talking about, even though it has been fascinating talking about it. But yourself and I've just lost the guy's name, but an ex
Topo Rodriguez, one of the great former Wallabies, Argentinian, most likely one of the best exponents of loose head scrummaging the world's seen. Yeah, we've sort of done this together.
And has written 2 books on scrummaging. So if you want to know the art of scrummaging, go check out his books, because as I say, he's written 2 books on that pre the crouch touch engage and post crouch touch engage as well. So both methods. But basically, the 2 of you were getting disenfranchised with the way that rugby was being played and the product that you were watching. So which parts of that were causing you to be disenfranchised with rugby?
Well, if I go back and start, for some years now, I've been very concerted with the way in which rugby has been moving. And I've thought, well, I'd really like to have a crack at rewriting the laws of the game. But I know full well that you just hit a brick wall with World Rugby, with most national governing bodies. So I was just sitting there thinking about it, and I was having a conversation with Topo and telling him about my views, and he said, "Well, why don't we do something about it?" So I said, "Okay, I'll write the laws or rules as they've turned out to be, and let's see what we can do." So I did most of those, and Topo chimed in very effectively, scrums and various other parts of the rules, and we've come up with rugby rules. And I mean, the most recent event that forced me to want to take some action was when Brodie Retallick was injured by Snyman, who's a big lump of a forward from South Africa. And Brodie Retallick was just basically lying there minding his own business. Snyman just piled straight into him in the guise of cleaning out. And Brodie Retallick ended up with a massive shoulder injury, kept him out of the game for 3 months, and he was not the same player at the Rugby World Cup. And he's one of my very favourite players of all time, Brodie. And I was incensed, absolutely incensed with that. But I turned my attention to the cause. The cause is the way in which and there's nothing in the current laws of rugby that allows you to do that allows you to attack a player without the ball. Nothing. And yet they've allowed people to say, well, we're going to interpret this and see just if the coaches want to do this, we'll let them do it, but we won't change the law. It's like all the players going off their feet all the time. The game is supposed to be played by players on their feet. It says that in the current law book, and it doesn't happen. So I just got incensed with all this, and then I just wrote these 10 rules and 6 regulations, and you can find them at www.rugbyrules.world. Use the benefit of being able to get a .world to put on the end of it, and you can go there and you can see for yourselves. But we've got to try and make this game safer. And you have a guy like Brodie, for example. He got over that injury, but what's it going to be like 20 years down the track? There are some people, I'm not saying he's litigious, but there are some people who will say, because of what you did not do with the laws of the game, we are now going to sue you. I'm not saying he's going to do that, obviously, but, and all the head injuries. I was reading about a Kiwi who played for Scotland, and he's had a massive number of head injuries, 6 head injuries, 6 times he's been concussed as a result of collisions in the game. And so, that is going to come back and bite somebody on the backside. There's no doubt about it. Somebody is going to take action against World Rugby if they are not careful. But they are so glacial in their approach to fixing these issues that I just got fed up with waiting. And so I decided, and along with Topo, we decided that we would try and do something about it.
There is also there's the injury side, and we've seen that litigation has caused the scrum rules to change, because again, World Rugby was scared about basically litigation there. We are seeing movement on concussion, but it has taken a long time to get there. Again, mainly because World Rugby is scared about being litigated against, and so that is one of the drivers behind some of these pieces.
But take the scrums, if I can just jump in there. Take the scrums. I mean, at the moment, the scrums are reset ad nauseum, and it takes time out of the game, and it is boring to watch. It makes the game very boring to play. I've spoken to players. The poor old backs there. They get catching cold out the backs while these guys to try and work out who's got the most dominant scrums. So, and when you reset scrums, that's danger. So in rugby rules, you can only ever reset the scrums once. You can't take the scrum past 90 degrees, past 45 degrees. And why do you? I mean, South Africa won the last Rugby World Cup by playing for scrum penalties. Since when has that been the purpose of rugby? It isn't.
Clearly, you've not watched England for the past 50 years.
Yes, okay. Well, I mean, we just
our way through.
Yeah, we don't play rugby like that in Yorkshire, but but England do, obviously. So, because I was born in Yorkshire, guys. Just there's no contest for the ball any longer. Now, even in Aotearoa rugby, okay, nobody was going into the breakdown to contest for the ball. They were just standing off and allowing the team with the ball to keep it. And so they're saying, oh, well, we'll just pick and drive, boring as batshit, right? So ultimately, you've got to have a contest for the ball, and you've got to have players on the feet. So we're bringing back rucking. The old-fashioned ruck where you can you're over.
I can see Boa smiling there, and thinking, yes, that means studs on players.
No, it doesn't mean studs on players. You cannot touch your players with your boot. It's about keeping players on their feet. And what are we trying to create here? Lightning fast ball. That's what we want. We don't want all this stuff on the ground looking like bloody Greco-Roman wrestling. We want the ball in play. So those are some of the really innovative things that we want to bring back. What we want to do is we want to make the game authentic whilst bringing it into the 21st century. Or I'm a few excited, guys.
Just to pull a few of those things together there. So we've got time wastage through scrums, overly complicated laws, creating a contest for the ball, and creating bits. And also part of that is also creating some space around the pitch. I mean, that's part of the reason for not contesting, is to try and fill as much of the space up as possible. Now, Boa, you've probably looked at the law book more recently than Stephen and I have. Can you remember how big or how long the law book is?
Very long, actually, very long. I go through the law book very regularly. If any of you gentlemen want to go through it, may I recommend that you have a bottle of rum, because that's how long it takes. It is very complex. It is overly complicated. And I fully agree with David. I think it's time World Rugby really took the bull by the horns, made it simple, simplified the whole game, and made it more spectator friendly, so that more people can actually understand what's going on. And I love the fact that David wants to bring back rucking. I think the biggest issue with the game as we know it in the current format is once rucking was taken out of the game, the breakdown just got completely messy. It was kind of like jelly wrestling, It's what I call lay and pray. Guys just going all over the show, and it was really killing the game. Also scrums, yeah, absolutely. I saw Steve Diamond, Director of Coaching at Sale Sharks. He came out quite strongly with the Premiership restart in Europe. The ball live in play on average after the Premiership restart, it was less than 26 minutes. So that means for about an hour and 20 minutes, it's just ambling. There's no action. It's slow. Scrum reset after reset. And also, I have to make a point on the whole yellow card, red card thing, especially with the high tackle framework. Now, World Rugby have come out quite strongly with this beautifully presented high tackle framework. It's all good and well. It looks great on a presentation slide, but once you take it out on the field, especially at the elite level, there are certain aspects of the high tackle framework which I think is absolutely delusional.
Can I just jump in there, please, Boa, because I've got something really cute to say about the card system. If in rugby, a player like Warburton is issued a red card in the first 5-10 minutes of the game, the contest is over. And the contest is over as a spectacle and as a competition, right, between those two teams. So we have a different way of dealing with these cards. We have black, white, and blue. A black card, you're off. But you can be replaced by a player that has not already been replaced. So then it's still 14 on 14, okay? So then you've got the integrity of the game still there. But at that point in time, there's no penalty. So what happens then is the referee indicates a blue card for the non-offending team, which means that team can use that card any time during the game to double the score that they've just made. So, for example, if they kick a penalty, it'll be worth 4 points instead of 2. But if they hang on to it, right? And they score a try, and they use the blue card then, and it's called a double. They can get a 14-point try. So you can see that the crowd will be involved. Use the double, and we've got 14 on 14. The same with a white card. If you, let's say, professional foul, okay, you issue a white card, the guy doesn't get sent off. What happens is the other team gets 3 points added to the score, and if they can kick the goal as well, it's a 5-point penalty. But what we're saying is we want to keep the integrity of the game 14 on 14, but if you infringe, then you're going to pay for it on the scoreboard. Now, do we want players to infringe? No, we don't. And this might be a way of actually reducing that, which is what the hope is. But in the end of the day, you don't want a competition or a contest, completely stuffed up in the first 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay, so some of the let's just run through some of the. Well, I think the key kind of things here. So we've talked about. If we just wrong screen. If I just hover those there, we talk about so advantage, pretty similar to what's there now, except you're saying if you kick it away, you lose your advantage, and it's only up to 3 phases. Scrums and lineouts. The key thing there is about the 20 seconds basically to start to make it happen. So we don't take so long. We don't have that huddle before a line out. We don't have so long losing it for scrums. For the safety
line outs, no lifting in the line outs. Sorry.
Sorry, right. Yep, and no lifting in the line outs. Come down to the tackle. It's below the armpits. So rather than below the head, below the armpits, so slowly, bringing that down further. Ruck, you have to be on your feet. Let's be honest. That's essentially what the laws say now, but just doesn't get it. As Boa said, it's jelly wrestling. It's not actually. No one actually keep their feet. That's and a more interesting. You said that teams have to put 3 players in from each side, so to create space out there. Interesting to see how that would actually be officiated. And then the kicking is kicking, and so those are the key. Sorry.
Yeah, in respect of the end zone, we're doing away with the 22-meter line. So if the ball goes into the end zone or dead ball area, then or the in goal, then it's a dropout. And you can drop out anywhere along that goal line as long as all the players are behind the goal line. So that adds another element of doubt into the other team where they're going to take this kick. And it's got to travel 10 meters. The other thing too, to create space, lineouts, as I said before, no lifting in the lineouts. We believe that it should be a straight man-on-man jump using your athletic ability, not your ability to get lifted. And we've seen in school games, coaches putting the smaller kids in to be lifted, and it's crazy. It's just not. That's not what the game is supposed to be about, in my view. We also say the lineout starts at 10 meters and goes back to 20 meters. So that gives you a more of an attacking blindside option. And it's the same with scrums. Scrums are no closer than 20 meters line and 10 meters to the goal line. Because what we're going to do is try and open up some space. And I can tell you what the other thing we're going to do to make sure you get 60 minutes of play. This game only lasts for 60 minutes. And it's in 3 periods, 2 20-minute periods. The breaks are 10 minutes long to give the advertisers an opportunity to have some more advertisements in there. I always keep an eye on that. But every time the play comes to a stop, then the clock stops, so that you get a full 60 minutes of play. And that is going to, I think, be a lot more interesting. The other thing too, can I just make one final point? This game is going to be easier to understand if you're sitting in the grandstand. And I think that's the most important, well, not the most, but it's one of the most important. People in the grandstand are wondering, I'm an ex-referee and I'm sitting there wondering what the hell's going on. There are so many different interpretations of every law. You can see and read Bo was talking about, read the book, have a look at the interpretation. It's crazy stuff. Crazy.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems is the alienation and disenfranchisement of spectators, especially at scrum time. It's just too hard to understand. I think what the players think of what it is, the correct interpretation, and what the referees say, and what the spectators, and then the bench, and us as coaches, there's so much misalignment. Sometimes it becomes a bit of a lottery. So I think, David, this is this very, very interesting, very exciting innovation. I think, especially with the American market, this will be an absolute hit. This almost reminds me of NHL ice hockey, where you've brought in some innovations where it's kind of like the power play situation, where you have a player in the bin, and it's more attack friendly, so that there's more time ball in play and less time people walking from breakdown to breakdown. And I think it's fantastic. Gentlemen, I just want to add something. Just with the high shots, I've been currently working on a framework called STF, Safe Tackle Framework, for the last 24 months. This is predominantly because I was getting frustrated with yellow cards and red cards for the slightest bit of high contact. So as you can see, this logo on my shirt, STF. I've actually written a new tackle syllabus for senior to elite level, as well as a tackle guideline and framework for the junior age grades. My main objective is to make sure that we get players tackling underneath the sternum line. And as the age grades go lower, we want to try and encourage kids to tackle lower. So, for example, when you get into contact, you're looking at knee line to waistline, and also the transition age grades. We're talking, 12, 14-year-olds tackling in between the waistline to the belly button. And when you come to first 15 level, the tackle height is no higher than the belly button and sternum. Currently, what I do with my side at Manuka Rose is all our players during contact, we actually have a Velcro strip which is attached to all our training gear, including the training shirts. So it's a visual guideline, just to make sure that the guys, stay low. And, obviously concussion and safety is a huge issue. And one of my biggest fears is that, 10, 20, maybe 30 years from now, contact sport might cease to exist, because as David rightly stated, there could be serious litigations. Lawyers and doctors will probably see to it that contact sport could quite well cease to exist. So us as rugby practitioners, innovators, coaches, rather than sit back and wait for things to happen, we have to actually go out there and look for a viable solution which is practical. But at the same time, we can't kill the spectator appeal, because, I like nothing more than to see big contact where guys run hard at each other. But we have to make sure that we do it in a safe, compliant, and practical manner.
Well, I mean, and I think you're 100. Sorry, I interrupted the host then. Sorry.
Go ahead, David.
No. I mean, I was just saying this whole safety. What we want is a full contact sport, which is simple, safe, fast, exciting, and fun. That's our mantra. And everything we do, we actually try. And as myself at Papa, we try and get that just to meet those criteria. And I think if we can meet those criteria, and see, a lot of people have said to me, and I noticed one comment there, that England will never go for rucking. Well, England's got nothing to do with this. No governing body or World Rugby has got anything to do with it. We're not dealing with that. This is a completely separate organisation. We're able to move as quickly as they do in rugby league now. You see how quickly they move? They've been moving, and if we found something wrong with this and some issue, we'd just change it. I mean, we don't have to go through all that crap that they go through. I've been at the IRB. I was the IRB delegate for New Zealand and also for Wales, so I know how they work up there. I'm not being overly critical, but their time, they need to get with the times, or they're going to they'll end up like you just said. But I just honestly believe that if we can get this game to be as safe as it possibly, there's always going to be injuries and there's going to be danger, but reduce that to a minimum. but make it easy to do what? We want it to be easy to coach, easy to play, easy to referee, and easy to watch. That's what we want, because then we're not going to have a problem with.
I think with contact and tackle. Sorry, Paul. I'm just going to add something real quickly. It's kind of like this whole single-use plastic bag. You know how supermarkets have phased it out, retailers have phased it out. What we want our younger kids playing rugby to do is to get this whole high tackle thing completely out of the system, take the neck, head, shoulders completely out of it. And 8, 10, 12 years from now, there may very well be no such notion as a high shot. And if something if there is a high shot, everyone will go, oh my god, what was that? Whereas at the moment there aren't enough coaching tools, and the framework is not flexible enough that most of these kids who've been taught to go high use techniques like choke tackles, go as high as possible. And I find this especially with Polynesian players, they love to get that the chest high contact. And all it takes is, a couple of millimeters slip and then bang, massive head collision, big concussion. So this needs to be, if we can learn bad habits, we can easily unlearn it as well.
Well, perhaps you could send me your paper.
Just deciding whether Boa was quick or not. There you go. I set the stopwatch for that, where he said he'll just be quick.
Geez, he's tough, isn't he?
I'd love to send you this paper. In fact, I've got a substitute for red card, which is an on-field orange card. It's a 10-minute binning for anything to do with high shots. So in the professional game, it means you go see the judiciary. If you have a case to answer, there'll be further sanctions. If you don't, you're free to play, but it's not a fatal blow where you're down to 14 men, so that we, for example, on the weekend, we had the Guinness Pro 14 semi-final between Connacht and Munster. 2 red cards, couple of high shots, it was game over. So that's the kind of situation.
Wasn't semi-final. Semi-finals this weekend. That was the last round of regular season.
I beg your pardon.
But Stephen, some of the some of the things we talk about here. We've got shortening amount of time. Something we've seen in global rapid rugby, getting to speed around setting up of scrums, lineouts. Again, something else we've seen in global rapid rugby. How do you feel that this is going to these kind of the structure? Does it still look like rugby to you? And how many of these relations we've seen already do you think that maybe do work?
I think firstly, Paul, what it tells you, there's some really good rugby people that are looking for innovation at the minute, because we don't want to be 10 years down the track talking about the same issues, because there'll probably only be 3 guys and a guy in a wheelchair talking about it, Paul. Seriously. I actually like your innovation, David. I like your innovation in and around the ruck. And when people talk about ruck, people all of a sudden think about sprigs. But what basically a ruck is binding onto people and basically blowing through. And even if the people who are basically on the other side of the ruck are there, they're not going to get injured. Trust me, because when you get blown through, the ball quickly comes out the other side. It frustrates me, the modern game, where, like you say, David, 2 people can go into a ruck. There's a guy basically just standing there, seal it, while everybody's looking around. And you're right, it does not mirror rugby. Twiggy Forrest, obviously, with rapid rugby, he's tried a little bit of innovation, because I think what he's looking at, and I suppose from a business point of view, he's just looking at opportunities, and he's probably looked at the current setup and thought, man, we want something that's a little bit more exciting, a little bit more expensive, a little bit like the, you look at the 40-20 in rugby league, and that kind of works because wingers drop back. So you want that wide ball movement. I actually like innovation. I don't want to die wondering, is what I'm trying to say.
Cool. So I guess the next step then, David, is we've got the structure. It looks to it all hang together. It looks like it's going to be the same sort of game. It looks like it's going to be faster. How are you actually going to get it trialed? How are you actually going to make a game happen?
Okay, I mean, we've done the easy bit. The easy bit is writing the rules and getting them out there for people to discuss, for us to get some sort of feedback. I mean, we've just had a comment here. I think it was Ashwin Rainshot, who's not a fan of a restart from the goal line, and he makes a very good point. So we have to get this game played. We've got two things that we're focusing on now. One is getting the game played, and we have got people in Argentina, the UK, South Africa, Australia, and perhaps here in New Zealand, who are prepared to give this a bit of a go, and just to see what's right with it, what's wrong with it. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've got all of the answers, because we won't know what the unintended consequences are of the intended consequences of changing the way in which our game is played. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that we've got to raise some funds, just like you, Paul. I'm retired, and so is Topo, and we're spending hours and hours and hours on this. But at the end of the day, I'm loving it, absolutely loving it, and I've got to raise some funds. So I'm looking at raising some funds through crowdfunding, and as one way of doing it. Perhaps we can tap some people on the shoulder who may wish to help out, and then we'll see how far we can go. I'm a very great believer in the market. The market will always determine what is going to succeed. So, we're just entering into the marketplace, and if people don't like it, then they won't. And we'll just be something else that was tried and didn't get anywhere. But, we do believe that we're getting a lot of people letting us know. We've got a lot of people now already lining up to be ambassadors, and these include ex-internationals and ex-international coaches who see merit in what we're trying to do. We'll see.
And interestingly enough, guys, another sport that I follow, and it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I follow UFC. Now, UFC is quite a young sport, but I also used to follow the boxing quite a bit as well. And like at times with rugby, the sport that I follow the most, sometimes you get frustrated with it. Well, I got frustrated with boxing because there were so many bad belts, so many titles, and through my son-in-law, he said, listen, try watching a little bit of UFC. And like I say, it's not everybody's cup of tea, and I enjoy the skill, but look how that sport has just absolutely taken off, and look at the audience that it's actually got. So what's to say that this new game of rugby played over 60 minutes doesn't have the same appeal? Your diehards may not necessarily like it, but for somebody who's looking for something a little bit different, who knows?
I was going to say just a bit earlier on that I've been told a few times that it might not take off in the UK because they're very traditional about their rugby. Well, I sort of had to point out to the guy that the game they're playing up there is so far away from being what traditionally rugby should be like. I can't believe it. That I think in actual fact, going back a little bit to what the traditions of rugby were might just be not a bad idea.
Yes, well, it was. We had was it the 100th anniversary of no, it can't be rugby school because it's been around for ages. There was an anniversary recently in the last year or two, and I was thinking, actually, what would have been really cool would have been to actually play, have a game of rugby played under the original laws that they had back in 18 whatever it was, when the first set of rules were codified, and then everyone who says, "Oh, that's not rugby," would very soon wake up and realize what we're seeing now isn't rugby. It is a million miles from the original one, where each side was as many people as turn up for each team. And it was essentially just a big pushing match just to see who could push over the massive bodies so that they can have a try at kicking for point.
At kicking a point, yeah, that's right. And in actual fact, Topo discovered that way back after it was codified, he found a position called the rover was actually one of the positions that was used back in those days. So we pinched that, and we've called the second halfback the rover. Look, it's going to be very interesting, and looking all the people with their points of view. And Simon Hughes is on there, I see, and he made a mention earlier on that I was the most hated man in Welsh rugby. I just like to make a comment. Yeah, no, it's fine. I think I most likely know him from Twitter or somewhere, but I just like to make the point that the new chairman of the Australian Rugby, of Rugby Australia, recently came out and said that you couldn't. What the actual word? You couldn't reduce you couldn't shrink yourself to greatness, right? And that's real good corporate speak, because he's just come out of the corporate world. I took exception with that. And I said, well, in actual fact, you can shrink yourself to greatness. And Wales proved that by going from 12 teams to 4 teams and won their first Grand Slam within, in the next 12 months. And they hadn't won one for 27 years. And this was all over whether Australia should have 3 or 5 teams in the Trans-Tasman. Something that I actually suggested, I'm not a big note myself, but something I suggested in 2007, that they should disband Super Rugby and go to a Trans-Tasman. But anyway, I mean, that's history.
Something we've been saying on the channel is that that the domestic competition should be played in time zone aligned rather than southern north hemisphere aligned. So yeah, no, totally agree with you on that one. I can see Stephen's itching.
No, just on what David said about Welsh rugby, I reckon very similar to Australia. David, when Australia only had 3 Super Rugby teams, I thought they were a heck of a lot stronger, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, the Wallabies were.
Yeah, very much so.
Absolutely.
Well,
there's not many.
This is Ben Darwin, who has a cohesion theory, runs a consultancy called Guideline Analytics. He says there is an inverse proportion between countries that have the highest number of players, but then have the highest number of first-class teams, i.e. Super Rugby or whatever. The more first-class teams you have, the less successful you are at international rugby.
He's a great guy, Ben Darwin, and he's got a lot of fantastic information, and more people should be using his services. He's in actual fact, I'm using him, to try and make sure that what we're doing is making sense statistically as well. So
I've gone blank to his partner's name, but we had a fantastic Shane had a wonderful long talk interview with him about his journey through designing cars to becoming a coach, to becoming an analyst, and fascinating guy as well. So yeah, the two of them do some great work, as you say, around the analytics of teams, not just sport, but also work teams as well.
He's a great story, Paul, because he obviously turned up just to hold the camera, watching an Australian rugby training session, and became their analytics guy. So it's a great story, but a very, very bright guy. That's a good interview too. Check out that interview on our New Zealand Sport website. It's somewhere there in the archives, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, it's somewhere there in the archives, or you can catch the podcast. Just search for New Zealand Sports Radio on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favourite pod catchers. Well, we've kind of run out of time. We've not had time to talk about the North-South squad. We've not had time or matches happening this weekend. Don't forget, folks, there is a festival of rugby this Sunday. We have Super Rugby AU game, followed by the North-South game, followed by another Super Rugby AU game. So you get to watch 3 games of rugby union back-to-back on Saturday. We'll be previewing all those games here on New Zealand Sports Radio at 8 p.m. on Friday evening. And we will also be reviewing the games at 8 p.m. on Sunday evening here on New Zealand Sports Radio. David, thank you so much for your time. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you, not only about rugby rules, but also about the Mitre 10 Cup and professionalism versus amateurism and other topics that we've dived down the rabbit holes with. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, Stephen. Thank you very much. Anytime you want me to sort of come on, I'll be more than happy to do so. I've been very impressed with tonight, obviously the number of people watching and listening, and I'd just like to wish you guys all the very best of luck as you try and give people what they really want. Well done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bill, for your time. And obviously, I'll have to get you David's contact details so you can show him your tackle framework that you're working on.
Absolutely, would love to.
And thank you very much, Stephen. Again, you'll obviously be joining me tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. for the morning sports briefing, folks. Your best way to start the day, up to date with all the important sports news at 7 a.m. here on New Zealand Sports Radio. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful week and enjoy the rugby that's coming this weekend.